Another bad weekend for Ireland in the Six Nations. Another blunder from Alisson as Liverpool continue their free fall down the Premier League table. Manchester United a disappointing draw to West Brom. Lots more happened this week. Hello and welcome back to the Sideline Podcast. Hi Liam.
Buena.
So Liam, I suppose we'll try to get through this one. It's going to be tough. Where I know on paper, obviously, France, are they're a great they're a big outfit, and they've found this new crop of players, and they're absolutely dominating most teams they play against. And do you feel like it is their Six Nations to lose now?
Uh, yeah, I really do think so. I don't really see Scotland beating them this year because France will be out to take revenge on them after last year because Scotland ended their hopes of the Grand Slam. I don't really see anyone beating them, not England, no one really, and I think that's quite a compliment to that French side because it's been a long time since the French have won a Six Nations, but they finally look like they're going to, and I do think they're well deserving of that because it's a fine team with fine players, Romain Ntamack, Antoine Dupont. There's so many more players I could name in the starting 15, the 23, and the I guess the rest of the squad that doesn't make the matchday 23. And there's just heaps of quality in all those names. They've really kind of gotten through that rough period they've had the last couple of years, and they're being blessed with this team full of young, amazing players who are going to last surely another 10, 15 years playing with that team. And they're very, very lucky to have that. Not many teams have so many, I guess, young, talented players at once, but they just do. And I guess they've struck gold with that, really.
If you are, Fabien Galtier, and you're looking at this new crop of players, and they've just so much, they've got so much going for them. Like Dupont now, he's like, oh my god, like this guy. Personally for me, I think he's the best in the world, and I think
You're not the only. I mean, you're not even the only one who thinks that. New Zealand's Aaron Smith, the number 9 for New Zealand, actually said the same. I mean, there's something
yeah, but
generational about this guy.
he's just so like he's so talented. Like there's so much he can do with the rugby ball that it. I mean, look, and I know it was a hard game to watch, and we dug deep, and we will go more in depth, to that in a second. But I mean, I was just, you're watching him, like you're just kind of watching him, saying, "Look at him go." He's just so good, and I think Ireland really lacked that last night with Conor Murray and Johnny Sexton being out. I think without saying that the fact that they're taking head injuries and concussions a lot more seriously. I think it's a great. I think it's great for the game, and the game is moving forward and is unrecognizable. I suppose from the game 10 or 15 years ago, but I really think that he is driving this France team forward.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not just him. You've got, like I said, Ntamack. He is injured at the moment, but still. I mean, Gael Fickou, Charles Olivon, the captain of the team, they're stacked with all the quality they have. And I mean, Gregory Aldrit as well. I mean, he plays under Ronan O'Gara in the top 14 for La Rochelle. I mean, like I said, there's really just nothing bad I can say about this French team. They don't lack quality in any of their positions. I mean, we even saw that a couple of months ago with the Autumn Nations Cup, the final against England. France were reduced to playing their so-called C team players due to the fact that there's a rule in the top 14 that states if they start 3 or more games, the French national team, they have to be recalled back to their clubs. So they were left with, I guess, much slimmer options, and the options they were left with was their so-called C team, and they were so unlucky not to beat that English side that day. It came down to only, I think, 3 points in extra time. They were very unlucky not to win. So that really speaks volumes about what kind of team France are after building at the moment. And it's not come easy to them. Players like Dupont made their debut back in 2019. They've been, I guess, built up for a couple of years now, and it is starting to pay off because it's like you invest in the talent, and they're getting results. I mean, they, like I said, they lost that English side, but they only have 2 or 3 test defeats in their last 15. That really just screams what this French team are all about, and they're going to be very scary for the World Cup in France in 2023 because, I mean, not only is it their home country, I mean, you're going to have players like Dupont who will probably be in his absolute prime by then. I mean, he's 21, and by then he's going to be 23 years of age, 24, and I mean, that's not a good thing for other teams to be hearing because teams are already afraid enough of him as it is. So come the World Cup, it's just going to be like, how are we going to defend against this French team? And I mean, Ireland really struggled to do that yesterday too. I mean, in the first 30 minutes, it was all Ireland ball, but once it turned to France for the last 10 minutes of that half, they could just not cope. And that really says something. I mean, the French were down to, I think the French were down to 14 men for 10 minutes, and even then, Ireland could not capitalise on that. It just screams something about their attack and their defence. It's so just... It's right. It's just I can't even kind of describe it really. They're just so, I guess, lucky to have the department they have.
I really do. I envy them in most ways because all of a sudden, Conor Murray and Sexton, these sort of people, when they're 25, it's all fine, but then all of a sudden they're 35. And it's kind of like, these sort of teams move on. Obviously, people like Rob Kearney are gone, and they've always been such. These guys have always been such big names for Irish rugby, and I do think it is going to be difficult to switch over to get a new crop of players. I know Rhys Ruddock had his first start for Ireland yesterday, and I couldn't believe it when I saw the stat. I think he's had something like 16 appearances and he hasn't started any of them, partly because I do think that Peter O'Mahony's been consistent, and even when he's had a fairly average performance, right when you start to he's just got it he's got the benefit of the doubt from Joe Schmidt or Andy Farrell. And then he's had an absolute blinder of a game, and I do think it's been hard for Rhys Ruddock to get into the team, even though I do think he is a big talent. Another thing though, like Billy Burns, like is he really going to be able to be? Is he going to be a good successor to Johnny Sexton? And I just don't think that Ireland really have what it takes, and I'm not really sure. Like, I know Joey Carberry obviously is, a big loss. And there are a few names. There are a lot of players missing from the Irish team. But I do think it is going to be hard to make a switch over,
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing that comes to mind when you say that is, when you look at the 10 options Ireland kind of have at the moment for international level, I guess, a couple of names come to mind. You think Jack Carty, you think Ross Byrne, and you think Billy Burns. And when we take a look at these players for a second, I mean, the biggest differences between Ross Byrne and Billy Burns is their kicking. So, for example, Ross Byrne, when he plays, he's much quieter than Billy Burns. He would try more carries. He wouldn't really try any kicks on the ball while on the pitch. But his goal kicking is tremendous compared to Billy Burns. And I mean, we saw that against France yesterday. I mean, you could argue Burns missed a pretty straightforward penalty, whereas Ross Byrne managed to slot a conversion at a very difficult angle and a 44-metre penalty. I mean, and you watch Leinster in the Pro 14 in the Champions Cup, and I mean, Ross Byrne does the same kind of thing there. So you have two very different players, but the thing about people like Jonathan Sexton is, I mean, Sexton is basically just the two of them mixed together. He does all the tricks and stuff on the field, but at the same time, Sexton also is very good with his goal kicking. Now, he has had off times with his goal kicking. I mean, a big example is the England game in 2020 in Twickenham, where we lost 24-12, Andy Farrell's first campaign. And he had quite an off day kicking that day. But I mean, he's come back from it because each time I've watched him kicking nowadays, especially in the Autumn Nations and this Six Nations before he got injured against Wales, he was pretty good at it. So I mean, the problem is you need to try and find a 10 who matches Sexton for all of that, and they really are struggling to. I mean, you can see why. Sexton, like I said, he may be somewhat past his best, but he's still a quality player. I mean, it's very difficult to find people to just replace him in one night because they're not going to. That's the thing. Sexton isn't someone you can just replace like that. You have to. It takes a lot of time. I mean, with Ronan O'Gara, he was quite lucky that at the end of his career, Sexton was coming through because Sexton already had quite a bit of experience when he came through, and I'd be saying the same right now about Joey Carberry and Sexton if it wasn't for Carberry's, I guess, really unfortunate injuries. But Carberry has had a lot of setbacks with injuries, so we don't really have that same kind of story as Ronan O'Gara and Sexton because Carberry just isn't fit, and he's struggled a lot with injuries. Definitely not with form. I've never questioned his form or his ability whatsoever because Carberry, I watched him play for Munster, especially his Champions Cup debut against Gloucester, and I honestly said to myself, this guy has to be the next 10 after Sexton's gone. And I still stand by that. I still do think he does, but it's a question of whether he's going to be fit or not. I guess fit enough or not to be that starting 10 again. Because, there is going to be other names that are going to creep in eventually if Carberry keeps having these injury setbacks. I mean, Ben Healy, Harry Byrne, they've got. I mean, JJ Hanrahan from Munster even could be in for a shout if he improves.
I would have to doubt that. I would have to seriously doubt that. I mean, I
wouldn't really actually.
I think he's a good player, but I think he is. He's just. He's not that. I don't think he's as good as he was. Like, I mean, I'm just especially coming towards the end of the season. I can't remember which opponent it was. It's just gone out. Was it Leinster? I can't remember, but he missed nearly all of his kicks, and I just can't. I don't know. I just don't really think that he's.
But at the same time, you can argue the same.
I take your point all the same. But anyway, speaking of injuries, the pack and the line-out, specifically, I thought were absolutely tremendous, especially in the absence of Caelan Doris.
Definitely. I think you can kind of see Paul O'Connell's kind of training starting to come in with the set pieces now. I think he's definitely had an influence in those.
Yeah, but
100%.
He definitely has, and I just feel like we're winning. We're winning a lot of the opposition's lineouts, which is a big plus. But I think it is still such a devastating loss for Ireland, and to have our Six Nations hopes sort of just cut down after two games. We go to Italy in a fortnight. I just think I'm just so disappointed, and I was absolutely gutted watching it. And for a moment there at the end, a glimpse of 2018's Grand Slam first round against France. Sexton's drop kick. Unfortunately,
I thought that was going to be. I did think as well.
I think Sexton to put that one away, but what can you do?
I do think even with Sexton in the team, I still think we would have struggled to hit a drop goal there, and I say that because in that kind of situation with that French defence, it's quite near impossible trying to hit a drop goal against that. From like the difference between the 2018 Grand Slam and that was really just the way France have improved their defence, and this defence was much more stronger than that 2018. We gained more ground than we did in the final play of that game compared to, I guess, yesterday. But this French defence yesterday was just, they were too just agile. There was really no way around them, and I think slowly the players started to learn that in a, I guess, bit of a cruel way. I think eventually they realised we're not going to get the space for a drop goal, and players started panicking, trying to take it up by themselves, and eventually turnover, and the game was gone.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it wasn't necessarily that they couldn't get the space; they just couldn't get past. Like, they were being pushed backwards by France. And I mean, that's where you have to take into account if Murray and Sexton were playing, there would have been the crisper pass, and they would have moved the ball quicker and maybe have gotten it out to James Lowe a bit quicker and drawn a line out or drawn a penalty from France further up the pitch, and maybe they would have been panicked. But I mean, France just looked far too comfortable in their defence, and I do think it disheartened the Irish attack.
Yeah, I think you could really start to see it after the first half when France were down to 10 men, and I think even Ian Henderson spoke about it
Down to
in
10 men.
the sorry, down to 14.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got a bit confused with football for a second. I mean, when they were down to 14 in the first half, around the 13th minute mark, I think Ian Henderson even spoke about it after the game as well. I mean, you know, when you have more men than the opposition, it was 15 on 14, and yet France was actually the team who capitalised on that. I think that was a real confidence breaker for Ireland. And I think especially because it was all Ireland ball for the first half an hour. They were the only team to have the ball, really. They were making France defend and defend. But they came out of that half with a man advantage, yet only 3 points. And France came out with 10 and a missed penalty. Mind you, we did miss a penalty as well, but even then, I mean, France achieved double digits much quicker than we did.
That just sort of cancels out the France one. Like that's what they were saying. Sort of post match, they were discussing that. But I mean, the big thing there, like even the yellow card, and just to sort of veer away from that a small bit, we've seen sort of a little bit of disciplinary issues, I think, sort of creeping back in, because we've, since the dawn of time, disciplinary issues were always the big thing with France. Obviously it cost them in the World Cup.
They cost them their Six Nation title. Yeah, it cost it. Not only that, against Wales, I remember that quite well. But it wasn't only just that it cost them in the Six Nations last year. It 100% cost them the title in the game against Scotland with their prop getting sent off.
But you see, it's all.
Don't remember his name, but
and it's all they sort of like I not that I care too much, but like it'd be so typical for them to bottle it and just get someone sent off, and it'd be such a Scotland thing to do. Speaking of which, lost to Wales again, and their hopes of a Grand Slam have deteriorated. I actually don't know. Like, I mean, like, what are they doing? I don't understand it at all. Like, this could have been their year, and Stuart Hogg has been proven wrong yet again.
I mean, they had a lot of chances to put that game to bed. I watched the game from start to finish, and I think the one thing that really cost them was their opportunity taking. Because Scotland had, I'd say, at least 10 more opportunities than Wales did to put the game to bed, but they just couldn't execute them. I think one of the biggest ones was when Stuart Hogg was through. He had one man to beat, and this wasn't his fault or anything, but unfortunately the ground was obviously not in the best state for rugby, and he slipped. And I think one of the biggest talking points was Ali Price kicking the ball away in the 78th minute. When you are down losing a game, you cannot kick to the opposition. That is the one thing you cannot do. Because if you kick away possession, you can't be guaranteed you're going to get it back. And with 2 minutes left on the clock, I mean, it's really not something you should be doing at all. And it really did cost Scotland something. And I mean, Duan van der Meer, he was through again, last play of the game, clock is red, and a brilliant ankle tap. It stopped him. And like, that's just a couple of examples of all of Scotland's missed chances to win the game. They'll feel really hard done by. I do feel quite sorry for them as well. I do feel like they were the better team up until that red card, which is still a controversial talking point. I don't think it was a red card at all. I think even a yellow card would have been harsh, but a red card is honestly beyond me. I really don't understand why Xander Ferguson got sent off for that. I watched the replay. I mean, a man popped his head up as he was already coming in. It's not as if he could have seen that. I mean, I don't understand how the match officials, looked at that and said, that it's a red. It genuinely wasn't. And I mean, this is the second time, it's the first 2 rounds of the Six Nations, and Wales have won both of their games through one-man advantages. And I mean, you kind of have to look at rugby as a sport now when you're starting to go, the game is, what is the game turning into? Because, I mean, it's going to turn into a point, I'm obviously joking, but where I mean, even a like contact itself could be a red card. I mean, it seems like as if any sort of contact these days in the game is being rewarded with a card, and it's
Well,
like I'm struggling to understand why. It's like the game is just. I understand the whole, like you said, the whole emphasis on head safety, which I completely agree with to avoid concussions. But I mean, for example, if Ferguson really did hit this Welsh player in the head, why was he not sent off for a HIA? Because he continued the game normally, and Ferguson was left watching on from the bench. It doesn't make sense to me.
I do think though that's very interesting because I'm not sure if you've heard about this new lawsuit that's being made against the rugby unions.
Yes, the some of the I guess I know one example, a player
Yeah,
from the 2003 World Cup. He says he has no recollection of winning it. I do know what you're on about. Yes,
are you serious? That's amazing.
that's. I don't remember what player it was, but I did read about it. A World Cup winner from England in 2003 says he has absolutely no memory of winning it from concussion.
Yeah, but
So,
basically, what it was, this new lawsuit is that things like, thinking of making non-contact rugby below the ages of maybe 13 or 14, tackles below the waist, all these different new things, and I mean, obviously, the way
mm,
you say that the game is where the game is going to be going. I was listening to Donncha O'Callaghan. Um, do I have that name right?
yeah, don't go,
Donncha
Calvin.
O'Callaghan, yeah, sorry, I don't know. Yeah, Donncha O'Callaghan. I was listening to Donncha O'Callaghan recently, and he was saying that, he did think that the game would be changing, and that it would, maybe in 10 years' time it would be, unrecognizable from the sport now. But the game it's unrecognizable of the sport when Brian O'Driscoll started playing. Is that necessarily a bad thing? Like, I mean, we
Uh,
would get, like, the game, it's so much different now, and it's it's changing all the time. There isn't really a lot to do that, but it's the same in every sport, whether be football, hurling, soccer. The sport changes, and especially in rugby, I don't think it might be too much of a bad thing. I mean, players' health and safety should be, it should be, it should be, the front. It should be the most important thing. I do agree with that because that thing that you said there. I'm just I'll try and look it up to see who that was. When I let you
I
talk there
mean,
again, but it's just like I don't think it'll be too much of a bad thing really.
it does get to a point though where you have to kind of say to yourself, "There's being safe, and then there's being too safe." I mean, rugby was created as a contact sport, and you know, take for example the 13 to 14 no contact rule. I mean, that's not rugby though. Is really the thing. I mean, like I said, rugby was made as a contact sport. Why would you take out the contact? I mean, fair enough. You obviously want to try and avoid concussion for, I guess, a lot of ages. You want to avoid that, and I can completely understand that. But you know, that's what makes the game, I guess, so entertaining for a lot of people. I mean, rugby league might not have as much, but it still has those big tackles, and it has, I mean, rugby would be losing a lot of its identity if that's the route it was really going to go down. And I don't really think a lot of people would disagree on that because, I mean, like I said, rugby is known for being the contact sport it is. It's known for being a gentleman's sport, even after all that contact. A game where at the end, the two teams shake hands no matter what. And I mean, if you're suddenly going to take out this contact and just completely replace it, then is that really rugby?
Yeah.
Because I mean,
So
it's as if they're catering too much to younger age groups.
yeah. Yeah, I completely understand that. Just to recap, Steve Thompson was the England player, 2003 England World Cup winner. Steve Thompson says he cannot remember playing in the 2003 final, something he believes is a result of brain damage he sustained playing rugby. Yeah, so that's very interesting, and obviously cause for more attention to be diverted to the players, and that do make the sport. Anyway, moving on. Just to get your quick opinions on, we'll do a quick recap of the Premier League and I suppose soccer this week, because some absolutely bizarre incidents has happened this week, Liam. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Um,
Definitely.
Kobach has a bit of a strange debut. I do not imagine that he thought going into his debut that he would have crashed into the goalkeeper in a ball that he seemingly had covered. Alisson failed to remember to say, "Get out of the way so I can clear this ball," or felt the need to clear the ball in the first place. Liam, I like it. It's just so bizarre. Like, what are your thoughts on it?
I mean, look, I watched the replay a couple of times to try and get my head around it, and I genuinely can't. I don't know what Allison was thinking there. I mean, the point of a defender is to defend, and I mean, maybe he didn't fully trust him because it's a new signing. I guess I'd somewhat understand that, but to not have any faith in your teammates and then go off and do that, it was reckless and it was really stupid by Allison, and it really did cost them any chance of getting back into the game. And I mean, you can't just blame it on them, though. I mean, the fact that the whole Liverpool team were winning, 1-0 until the 70th minute, and then it was gone just like that. 8 minutes later, it was 3-1. I mean, what is going on at the moment? I mean, they've lost their top four spot tonight with West Ham's win. West Ham move into fourth, Leicester City third, United second, City first. I mean, these guys were the champions last season. They had 70 points this time last season, 73, I think. And now they have 40. Barely. And I mean, I understand, for example, Jurgen Klopp has gone through a tough week. I do feel for him. And it's not easy getting all the crap that he does as the Liverpool manager. He's come under a lot of fire for it, but I don't really think it's Jurgen Klopp's fault because he's the same manager that brought them their first ever Premier League title. And he's also the same manager that brought them their first Champions League since 2006 or 2007. It was the miracle in Istanbul. And I mean, for the same people to turn against him and claim that it's his fault, it's nothing short of a disgrace, really. I mean, this man has done so much for Liverpool. He's completely changed their identity. He's done so much. And, for a lot of Liverpool fans to be treating, him the way that he is being treated, it's horrible. And it's not just Liverpool fans, But, I understand I am going slightly off topic. In terms of what happened with Kabak and Alisson, I'm still trying to get my head around it. I mean, I don't understand. It might be because of, I guess, lack of communication from languages since, Kabak is a new player. I believe he's from, I'm not quite sure where he's from, but I do know that he's definitely not from Brazil, obviously where Alisson is from. And he may not have perfect English because he's come from the Bundesliga, And I mean,
Leverkusen,
fair enough.
I think, yeah, Leverkusen. I'm nearly sure it is.
So, yeah, so, I mean, fair enough if Alisson gets a bit confused and whatnot, but to run out like that as fast as you can and smash into him, I mean, that could have been dangerous as well, What he could have smashed, they could have clashed heads, they could have given each other concussion. I mean, not only was it stupid, but it was dangerous, and it's the second time in a row Alisson has made an absolute blunder like this. And I'm not going to deny the fact that he's a great keeper, but I'm not going to say he's world class because I never did think he was. I always thought he was very good, excellent, but never world class. I never quite thought that he was up there, and I say that because I feel a lot of him was covered by his amazing defence. I mean, he didn't really ever have to do that much, especially in 2020 for their Premier League winning season. But I mean, he's more exposed now. You've got Jordan Henderson and Fabinho who are natural midfielders in front of you. And of course it makes you much more vulnerable. I mean, I'm not going to pin the loss on him, but, to do what he did it's a big mistake. He really should be going home and working on that whenever he's back in the training ground, And he needs to talk to Kabak and get it sorted with him. And if he can't understand him, he needs to say that, really.
I'm not sure if you saw, but there was a lot of controversy about the VAR decision in that game with regards to the James
Maddison's goal. Yeah.
So I think the whole thing was that Daniel Amarte was supposedly he was offside or something. I can't remember, but apparently this whole controversy came with regards to the different angles and centimeters change with the video analysis with regards to where the line was placed on his body. And it's it is centimeters, but it does really matter. And looking back on some of the pictures, it is so bizarre, the difference, and it does it does make you wonder. I'm not sure if you saw Harry Maguire's interview where he came out and said, that um, a lot of teams, especially teams like Liverpool, I think he said that Liverpool have gotten the same amount of penalties in the last, 5 years since he's been there in two. And I think he sort of signalled out, it was pretty obvious that he was talking about Jurgen Klopp, that now Liverpool are now Manchester United are playing without VAR, um, because Jurgen Klopp and different people were complaining about it so much, and it is a weird way of phrasing it, suggesting that they were playing with VAR on their side beforehand. But I just think there was some bizarre decisions, like with the counter attack, just as the referee blew up for half time, and Martial is speeding away, and it's just called to a halt. Like what happened there?
I don't have a question for you, to be honest. You're going to have to ask Ollie himself. I mean, I don't know. Fair enough. It's a weird season. Teams are dropping in and out of form like flies, but Man City did finish comfortably second last season on 81 points, 15 points ahead of us, and it looks like this season they're going to do it again, except they're going to finish as the champions. And I mean, Ole made some comments earlier saying, do not count Manchester United out of the title race, but you cannot be saying that when you draw to teams like West Brom, you lose to teams like Sheffield. You cannot be saying you're in a title race if you're losing those games. They just simply do not deserve to be, to say that they are.
Quickly though, as well with that, in that interview by Harry Maguire, he said that, you're not going to come to a West Brom team coached by Sam Allardyce and get 10 chances. There's something, I think, fundamentally wrong with what you're saying when, most teams, I think every other team that's played them since Sam took over has created that much. And it's just I get what he's kind of saying, because it is a Sam Allardyce team, and it's sort of like defend for your life and don't concede goals, but it's just so it's bizarre the way he said it. I don't understand it, but I do understand what he's talking about.
I'm just confused. The fact that they conceded in only the second minute as well, it's not good enough. It's Manchester United. This isn't a joke team. This is, as they say, the best football team in England, and for a while the best in the world. What is happening? They were on amazing form before, I guess, the end of January, and now suddenly it's as if it's turned into last 7 games, 2-1. They lost to Sheffield, second last in the table. Sorry, last in the table, mind you. We gifted them their second win of the season, and yet people like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer are still claiming that we have enough to be in the title race, but we don't. If Man City win this game in hand, they go 10 points clear. What exactly are we meant to do then? Because
I just think, especially since they've won their last 17. Is it 17 games now? They've won, they're just not dropping points, and it's impossible. And it's hard to see them losing. Especially, can I just say, and I do just want to discuss this quickly before we finish up. Gundogan, Raheem Sterling's found great form, not necessarily scoring, but just these sort of darting runs into the box. He started to focus less on, maybe finishing, and a lot more running and dribbling. And, he's just such a class act. And Phil Foden, that man again. But quickly, Gundogan, what has turned around for him? What is he doing differently?
Honestly, I've no clue what Pep Guardiola fed him in the Man City change rooms. But whatever he did, it's working, because he's in the form of his life. This season, in 2021 alone, he has 9 goals. I mean, he has 2 more than any other player in the league this season, and he has more than Liverpool. Sorry, not in the league, but in 2021. He has more goals than Liverpool in 2021. I mean, I don't understand how he's somehow come out and done this, but I mean, Man City fans and Man City coaches and players alike won't be complaining. I mean, the man is in the form of his life. I mean, watching him against Tottenham was very satisfying to watch, especially his goal against Davinson Sanchez 1-on-1. I mean, he really did put him to bed for that goal. And, I wouldn't have ever really made much of Gundogan as a player before this season. I mean, I wouldn't really have noticed him whatsoever. But the form that he's in at the moment, it's as if, I'm starting to think if he keeps this up until May or whatever, I do think he could potentially be Premier League Player of the Year. He is really screaming for that, and he's stepped up a lot in the absence of Kevin De Bruyne. I mean, teams probably had a bit of hope when they saw Aguero is out and De Bruyne is out, but has that affected United? I mean, has that affected City at all? No, it really hasn't. I mean, like you said, 17 out of 17 in their last 17. I mean, who's going to stop them? I don't see Tottenham stopping them in the League Cup final, especially not after that 3-0 trashing against Jose so the other day. They are just unstoppable, really. I don't see anyone getting anywhere close to them. And I do hate saying that as a Man United fan, but you do have to recognise when a team is great, and this team is great. I won't ever lie about that. It's a top Man City side, and Pep Guardiola is highest of the highest caliber of manager. He's a smart manager, and he's a good one at that.
Liam, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, first hat-trick of his career, was it? Or Premier League career? I'm not sure. It was something like that, which I found incredibly hard to believe. But he scored 4-2 against Leeds. Leeds again, very gracious losers, and everyone very popular losers, I suppose, playing the game the way it should be played. But that's one for Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang to take home, and maybe he can regain a bit of form. But Arsenal. Yeah, yeah. What are your opinions on Arsenal? Actually, just the last thing before we finish up.
Well, I mean, I guess just before moving on to Arsenal, Aubameyang will be happy with himself, as Arsenal fans will. I think he started off the season pretty poorly. I think he netted, once against Fulham, and I think it took him almost a month or two to net again. But fair play to him. Leeds isn't exactly an easy game. They play very, very good football under Bielsa, and a hat-trick is very good. And I mean, when in form, you would expect that from Aubameyang. But in terms of my thoughts on Arsenal as a whole, they seem like a team that should work on paper, but they don't. And I mean, I say that because you look like you have a Champions League winner in David Luiz, a Europa League winner, and a Premier League winner. I mean, you've got Nicolas Pepe, a 70 million right winger who was one of the top scorers in League One. You've got Willian, a Europa League and Champions League winner. I mean, they had Petr Cech, the same kind of caliber. But there's just feels like there's so much wrong as well. I mean, the dismissal of Mesut Ozil was honestly beyond me. And it just feels like they're really lacking something when it comes to creativity. Now, they have players like Saka and Emile Smith-Rowe and Martialini, but at the same time, they're quite young as well. You can't be putting all your focus into these young players, because it's going to put too much pressure on them. I mean, you look at other young talents. Wayne Rooney, when he was 16, yeah, he was amazing, but when he was at Man United, it wasn't as if he was it wasn't as if he was their talisman. The pressure wasn't on him. It was okay if he had an off game, because I mean, there was players like Solskjaer, Ferdinand, Scholes, Roy Keane, and I mean, if he had an off game, it was fine. But it's like Arsenal seem to be looking to these players for their creativity, Saka and Smith-Rowe, and it's like if they don't perform, then the rest of the team doesn't want to either. And it's the same with Aubameyang and Lacazette. Like, if those two don't perform, then it falls apart. the team doesn't want to step up. And I mean, it's resulted in them being 11th place, almost 9 points off a Champions League spot. I mean, I'm not quite sure where exactly it's going wrong for them. Arteta at first did seem promising, but whatever he's trying to do hasn't worked yet. And I say yet because he did win an FA Cup by beating Man City and Chelsea last year. You know, you can't completely disregard him. And he was Pep Guardiola's assistant. But I mean, at the same time, you know, the complete dismissal of Ozil, that was, you know, I thought that was a really big misjudgment. Even if he was on a giant killer wage that was damaging the club's, I guess, debt, it was a mistake to let him go so easily. I don't understand why they did that. And obviously, I'm not the club leader, so I shouldn't really be making comments. But I just, you know, I guess
I can understand.
I can't.
I can understand why, like, it'd be confusing. But I mean, look, he hadn't been playing, and he has said that he does love the city of Istanbul. Liam, I won't keep you any longer. Thank you at home for listening to this episode of the Sideline Podcast. Thank you, Liam, for talking to me.
Thanks, Anna.